Hello and welcome back to Tokyo PM. Today we're going to be talking about procrastination. Procrastination is an absolute killer of productivity that I find affects me in my day to day, and it can have some pretty bad knock on effects. And so today we're going to go through top 3 advice that I have for how you can overcome procrastination in your day to day. Now, I will say I do this or I say this better than I do. And so this is something that I'm still working on myself, and you probably are too, which is why you're here watching it. So let's go through it. So first, procrastination. What is procrastination? And procrastination is consciously doing something that you know that has a negative benefit in the effort to delay something else, right? So let's say I know that I need to cook, but I don't want to cook and I'm kind of trying to procrastinate about cooking. And so then what I'll do is I'll do something else that is not necessarily beneficial. You have two kinds. You have the first kind where it's like, I'm doing nothing productive. And so I'm just going to sit and maybe scroll on Instagram for a little bit, which doesn't help anyone. Or the second one is I'm going to do something that's seemingly productive, but not the thing that I'm supposed to be working on. So for example, using cooking as an example, if I need to make lunch, but I'm procrastinating on making lunch, and I go, oh, I'll take out the trash, I'll clean the room, I'll do the vacuuming or do something else, but I'm still avoiding the thing that I'm working on. And so I would argue that that one is not so bad because at least you're doing something, even though it's not the thing that you're supposed to be working on. But the main issue is when you're doing something genuinely detrimental or something that's not productive in any capacity to the work that you're supposed to be doing. And I would argue this is not a factor of laziness. You have some people who procrastinate and go, oh, it's because I'm lazy, so I'm not going to do anything and I'm not going to take agency on what I do. It's not a matter of laziness. Perfectionism comes from fear. And it comes from fear of doing the task. It comes from fear of doing the task that you're trying to avoid. And so you think, oh, I don't want to do it. And then you're not dealing with those emotions that come up in relation to the task. So for example, if I'm at work and I get a task that is kind of big and I go, ooh, I don't know what I'm supposed to do for that task. I don't know what the next step is. I don't know what my contribution is in this item. And so what I personally do is I would create a task on my calendar. And I put the task on my calendar. But if it's too big, if it just goes, update this spec, for example, that's not clear enough. And that's not an actionable enough item in my calendar that when it comes around, I look at it and go, oh, I don't want to do that. And so I end up dragging it and it gets later and later. And so then my first recommendation would be to sit down and to write down why you're scared. Are you scared because it's a big project that you're working on and you want to make sure that it comes out well? Are you scared because you're not clear on what you're supposed to make? And so you're afraid of making the wrong thing? Or are you scared simply because you're putting yourself out there and that's inherently scary? Like let's say you need to make a presentation for an executive. That is an uncomfortable feeling. And so my recommendation would be write down why you're scared. What's causing you to procrastinate? And reflect a little bit. This might take 5 minutes, it might take 25 minutes, but take the time to understand why am I avoiding this task? And that'll help you get a little bit more clarity on what you need to do next. Now, my next recommendation would be break down the task into 25-minute chunks. Personally, I do what's called time boxing. And so I would show you my calendar, but it's a bit of a mess. But what you do is in your calendar, you would set the time that you would do to achieve a task. And so personally, I use Google Calendar for this. I think it's great. You can click, let me check. You can click create, and then under create, you've got event and you've got task. If you click task, then it'll set by default the 30-minute buffer, which is just a little bit longer than what one Pomodoro would be, which is the tomato timer that's 25 minutes. And so it'll set a 30-minute block in your calendar, and there you can write the task that you want to accomplish. And the nice thing is when you finish it, you can click it and say, mark it off, and you'll see it with a strike through. And so at the end of the day, you can look at your calendar and be like, oh, I did that. And so then you can review how your day went or even last week. And so personally, I find try to break your tasks down into 25 minutes. If you write update spec, but you're not clear to yourself on what you need to update, how you need to update it, who you might need to ask to update it. So then my recommendation would be that task is too big. Instead, go to the spec, look at what needs to be updated, and you can have a task like plan out updating this task. Then do that for 25 minutes and understand what do I need to update, what is wrong, who do I need to talk to? And you can set those as separate things and give yourself the time to do the item properly. If you think, oh, I'll get it done in 25 minutes, and so I'll just make it a big, vague, overarching title, that won't actually accomplish anything. And instead, you make yourself more scared because you're trying to push it down. Now, my third recommendation. Yes, my first one is write it down. Write down how you're feeling. The second one is to create 25 to 30-minute chunks. And if your task is too big, break it down. Really try break it down. And the last one, set smaller deadlines to yourself. So the reason that I like this time boxing system is because if you set the task, you're kind of setting a deadline of I'm going to get it done in this time. But let's assume it's a bigger project, right? So you're not going to set yourself 25-minute deadline. But instead, if it's a project that's due in 2 weeks, you can say, okay, well, if it's due in 2 weeks, then next week I'm going to get this amount done. And in doing so, you hold yourself to that standard to make sure that you're making progress on it. And at the same time, if you do feel fear or if you do feel scared, then you sit and you try to understand why. And in doing so, you're able to slowly chip away at that fear and slowly make progress to get the item completed. This fear could be a lot of things. It could be perfectionism. It could be, fear of public speaking. If it's something that you need to present, it could be anything. And so it's worth sitting and trying to understand your fear and work through that. And only once you do that, actually, you're going to find that the work that you need to do can go a lot faster. So that's my recommendations for procrastination. If you struggle with procrastination, please do let me know. I'm more than happy to have a discussion because it's something I struggle with all the time. Okay. Thank you. And I'll see you in the next one.